Yeah, just to make a small disclaimer in the beginning, this is going to be a bit of experimental talk. I haven't shared it anywhere before, so bear with me if I will be doing some weird stuff from time to time. I hope that everything goes smooth. So yeah, when I was at Agile Swarming last year, I was delivering a workshop here on systems thinking, and I really enjoyed the experience and all the organization that the team put into making this event happen. So when they announced the new edition, I knew I want to get there. But I saw that this year's conference is going to be on leadership. And I was suddenly tasked with, okay, finding what can I tell about leadership. And I thought that, to be honest, maybe I have quite some stuff. And what I'm going to present today is my deep reflections on working with leaders, being a leader myself in a few companies for Scrum Masters, Agile coaches, and also helping company leaders to transform the way they work, the way they organize their culture and company. A few words about myself. I'm a Scrum Master since 2014. So technically we can say 10 years already, probably. I'm locally based in Krakow since 2 years, and this is my favorite city in the world. I plan to stay here and really love it to the bottom of my heart. I currently occupy several roles. So I work as an Agile coach at a company called Yesir. You might call it a Bolt or maybe Uber of North Africa. So they provide all the same services like ride-hailing, food delivery, groceries delivery, etc. I'm also a trainer and consultant with my partners in a company called Coactors, where we mostly deliver online trainings on Agile team facilitation, Agile coaching, and other stuff. And sometimes when there are some interesting challenges, I also do some consultancy on organizational design and agility under my own brand of Agile Expert, which is where I get the food for thought for all these conference talks, because it's very interesting. Over the last 6 years as a consultant, I was able to work with quite some interesting companies, mostly product companies, which is an important differentiation I always tend to make, because like the culture, the structure, the processes you may need in an outsourcing company may be a bit different compared to a product company. Maybe some of these companies, like, I don't know, N26, what else? They're relatively not represented in Poland, unfortunately. But believe me, these are big companies. So yeah, leadership. Probably before I start talking about some ideas about leadership and advices about leadership, it's important to align what do we mean by that. What I observe over the last 10 years in the IT industry is that we started doing a lipstick agile when we started calling yesterday project managers Scrum Masters, yesterday business analysts product owners. And basically I see the same tendency when it comes to leaders. So more and more companies just put leaders instead of managers and say that it's it, this is it. The change has happened. We now have not managers, but leaders, people who guide everyone, who have not only power, but also influence and trust. And I think this is not true. I think very often, unfortunately, managers we work with are lacking real leadership skills. So yeah, luckily you can see some of this because it's quite big. But yeah, I really like this infographics, which basically describes the difference between managers and leaders. And often managers are tasked with kind of taking some process, making it work, retaining the status quo, and making sure that we are implementing this process as efficiently as possible. Typically, they are given some power to make this happen. And in case you don't agree with this, one of the tools they have is to either fire you, do some, I don't know, penalty on you, or etc. Leaders, in my opinion, are a bit different kind of creatures. They try to use so-called soft power in order to influence people. They try to gain trust. They try to gain support from people, and they try to inspire people to follow them. They may go in the same direction. They may try to achieve the same goals. I mean, managers and leaders, but they're utilizing different set of tools and skill sets for that. And I really like that quote that leadership is an action, not a position. Just by giving someone a power and putting them higher in the company hierarchy, you don't automatically make them leaders. This is a very important thing, which I also learned on my own experience with after some time. However, I would say that leadership skills and leadership traits is something that every modern manager needs, because we're living in a employee-driven market where often people can choose where to work, especially if we talk about software developers or other people who are in high demand and low offering. And applying old school management approach where you treat your subordinates as resources, where you think that you know the most, doesn't work. You will just leave people. And we all know this saying that people join good companies but go away from bad managers. This is something that probably many of us have faced in our lives. And because I believe that leadership traits is something that every manager needs, this is exactly what I want to talk about today. So just another quick disclaimer, there are many models on leadership, many schools of thoughts on leadership. Like there are even tools for leadership assessment like Leadership Circle or other tools which you may find online. I believe they're all good, but in this talk I wanted to rely on my own experience, not on any model that you can just take and try to apply to your workspace. And the first leadership trait I found very, very important in agile environments especially is the intellectual humility. So you probably know the person named Socrates because you attended school, you learned about history, you learned about philosophy, and you know that back in the time when he lived, Socrates was considered to be the smartest person alive. Like, of course, there was no quantum computing, artificial intelligence, the scope of human intelligence was limited, and it was believed that Socrates is the person who knows the most. But at the same time, there is this favorite quote of Socrates that I know nothing. What he was trying to say with that is that very often people believe they know everything and get very overconfident about their knowledge. But in reality, they know nothing. And if you if you have enough humility to admit that you know nothing, you're already smarter than the rest of the people around you, most likely. Many things have changed since then, but I believe that intellectual humility is still one of the most important traits for leaders. What do I mean by that? Psychologists typically describe intellectual humility as an ability to stay open to some new ideas, to be open to getting your ideas and beliefs challenged, but at the same time, also relying on your previous experience and taking everything with a grain of salt, applying critical thinking to every new information you receive. And what I observed while working with different companies over the last 9 years is that very often the level of humility of people in the leadership positions has a direct correlation with the level of success of a company and also the level of success of like agile implementation in a company. When I used to work in my third company as a Scrum Master, I was faced with a very interesting situation because I was directly reporting to the CTO, and when I arrived to the company, they used to be structured in a like pre-agile structure, let's call it that way. They had functional teams like QA team, backend team, front-end team, project managers to somehow organize this collaboration, and that person wanted to change it. What was also interesting is that this person was like 2 times as old as myself, so technically I could be their son or child. But what was very interesting is that starting from the first day in the company, I felt that despite the difference in age, despite the difference in experience, despite all the potential differences we might have, this person is very open towards listening to my ideas, to what I'm thinking. He was not trying to kind of make me do what he wants. He was trying to understand how do I think about certain situations, how should we approach that, how should we approach this. And I will be honest, I was lacking intellectual humility myself back then. So I was thinking out loud and thinking that I know everything, which was my problem back then. But over the next year and a half, we developed a very interesting collaboration mode when we had some work meetings, we had some situations where we would try to apply facilitation, like coaching, other skills in order to raise the bar of efficiency of our process. But 3 times in a week, on the morning, when I would arrive to the office, he would take me, we would go to the nearest coffee shop, take coffee, take some snack, sit and just talk for half an hour about different stuff we are facing, like these issues, that issues, why is it happening, what hypothesis do I have, what hypothesis does he have about it. And it was a very, very interesting environment to be in, because I felt, first of all, that this person, once again, despite all our differences in age, in, I don't know, status, in income, in maybe even education, is ready to open to what I have to say. And he was asking some very good questions, which were making me think out loud. Over the next 8 years, I've seen such leader only once, again, and it was, for some reason, that was again a person much older than myself, with much more experience, but very open to external perspectives. So I would say that together with that leader, we achieved a lot. We were able to transform the company in less than 2 years from like an old style approach to a new approach with like cross-functional teams, with really business and customer focused development, and with regular iterative development and shorter feedback loops. So I believe that his intellectual humility and his ability to ask good questions and listen to what I have to say was really helpful, because I was not the only person he was doing it with. There were some other people he was applying the same skill with. And when I was preparing this talk, because intellectual humility is some phrase which was sitting in the back of my mind for a long time. But when I was preparing this talk, I decided to investigate and also to look for some pictures. And there is a book and also probably a educational class and even a conference called Enterprise Agility. Have you ever heard about Enterprise Agility podcast, Enterprise Agility conference by Eric Buchler? He has collected a very big body of knowledge about like things that are important in order to implement enterprise agility in companies. And I was really curious to find out that intellectual humility is also one of the things he considers important for that. This model is called FISH model for intellectual humility, and he says that it's very important, especially when it comes to working with the data and working with the market researchers for any leader. So you can say that intellectual humility works out in all directions. You need to understand what you know, you need to understand what are the limits of your knowledge and how much you still don't know, and be open to listen to others. And there is one good method for that, which you can take and apply. This is, by the way, something I plan to do in regards to every trait I'm going to describe, give you some actionable advices. So Socrates was favorite not only for that quote in the beginning, but also for a few books he left and also for a few methods he left. So there is a so-called Socratic method, which is basically a way for conveying and investigating new information. And it was even described in the Management 3.0 book. We had the author of it today, right? So you probably know Jürgen Appelo and his work. He describes the Socratic dialogue there. They have a very good article on the Management 3.0 blog, where you can read more about it. But what I suggest to you, if you are a person working with leaders in a company, is to basically introduce the Socratic method of questioning to your workplace and help your leaders to master it. Because for people, especially coming from a technical background, it should be a very easy thing to master, in my opinion, because it's a very logical structure which you can take and apply to every problem you are trying to solve. The key important factor is that the person needs to be intellectually humble enough in order to be open to other positions and opinions. So leaders should speak last. The next thing is systems thinking, and surprise, surprise, yeah. Given that I was delivering the workshop on systems thinking last year, it's not surprised that I put it in the list of top leadership traits. So how many of you are familiar with the topic of systems thinking? Can you raise hands? Okay. Would you agree that this is important for a leader? Awesome. Okay, then I will go through this part very shortly, maybe only for the people who are not familiar with it as a discipline, and talk a few words. If you're familiar with systems thinking, you are probably also familiar with William Edwards Deming, who is one of the key minds between the systems thinking in the 20th century. And I really like his take on the leadership. So he always used to say that the aim of leadership is not to just like manage resources, give tasks to people, and also to like do some kind of performance reviews. In his opinion, the best thing that any leader can take is to identify the causes that can lead to some unwelcomed outcomes, which we typically call fails or failure, as he says here, and help people to do a better job with less effort. So basically what he was trying to say is that managers/leaders' job is all about understanding what makes the system, be it the company, the team, the software, the department work the way it works right now, and change the design of the system in order to improve its performance. And very often, unfortunately, I see leaders demonstrating a linear thinking. Just a few months ago, I had a situation when I was talking to a general manager of one company, and he's quite distant from the software development himself, but he leads the whole product and tech department, so he has to kind of be a leader for both parts. And we were talking on the topic of the team structure and how they want to restructure the teams. And he came and told me, so Denis, there are like few teams in the department you are consulting, and we want to reorganize them. We are not currently happy about the lead time of those teams. It takes too long to get anything done. So we want to break them down into 3 teams so that they do things faster. Good and old divide and conquer. When I asked him, okay, so what are the outcomes you expect to get from it? He said, well, we believe that by narrowing down the scope for each team, they will have a shorter lead time, resulting in better outcomes in the end. I then asked him, okay, so you will give them different components to work on, but when it comes to the end user product, when it comes to what users actually are using on their phones and their laptops, how often do you have features which require changes in all of those components in order to get the final result delivered? And he told me that, well, he doesn't know for sure, but in his belief, it's happening quite often. So the majority of features will require work from all of those 3 teams. And okay, I asked him, okay, so we will now have 3 separate teams instead of 1 team with 3 different backlogs, with 3 different queues. So, and you say that you expect better lead time in each team. He said yes. And I said, okay, and what happens when they need to put it together and integrate in order to deliver it to the user? He said, well, the last team working on their part will have to take care of that. And I asked, okay, but don't you see that there is a problem that you may cut down the lead time on a single team level, but overall lead time will grow because there will be different priorities in those backlogs, team will be dependent on each other, and it may take much, much longer time to get something delivered in the end. And I think I saw that something some fire in his eyes in that moment. He kind of realized what I was trying to lead to. And we decided that probably this change of the team's composition was not a good idea and we need to approach it differently. Another example of linear thinking versus systems thinking I often bring up, and sorry if you ever heard it before in my conversations or in a workshop, is the example of one of the technical leads I've been working with last year. So we were working in a part of the company which was tasked to innovate, to come up with some new revenue streams for the company. And basically that meant that we were working on something until it's ready to be delivered to the customer. And it could take not 1 or 2 sprints, but several months before we start receiving some feedback. And once he told me and says, called me and he says me, so Denis, like, you know that we are currently in a situation when we don't have money to give people raises, we don't have opportunity to give people promotions, people are upset. I think we need to come up with additional motivation. Okay, that sounded really interesting. I told him and asked him what's the idea he has. He told me that, well, we are basically a startup incubator within the company, right? And what usually motivates people working in startup incubators is that they get some share in the startup. So in case this startup succeeds, they can sell their share or they can get more money for it, and that's their additional motivation. So he continued, why don't we give all the developers who work on those startups some share in the revenue which this uncovers if it succeeds, so that they are better motivated? And I told him, well, okay, this is a very nice, interesting idea, but I have one question. So how many people do we have working on this startup department? And he counted like quickly and told me, well, it's about 30, 35 people. Okay, I continued and asked him, okay, and how many developers do we have in total in the company? And as far as I remember, the number was around 350 or so. And my next question was, okay, so how do you think the rest 300 people will feel about working just for their salary, while these 35 people are also getting some additional bonuses on top? And he said, well, probably they will not be really happy about it, because they will know that there is a place in the company where they're not allowed to go, but where they can get more than just a salary. And yeah, so this was another example of person thinking very locally, thinking only about the local needs and not applying the systems thinking to see a bigger picture. Unfortunately, systems thinking is a skill that is hard to get. But on the other hand, it's still possible, and I think that we as change agents are often tasked to do so to help the company succeed. One of the easiest way to start doing first steps in systems thinking, in my opinion, is to techniques for systems modeling, like causal loop diagram we have here. And I think that it's good for every Scrum Master and Agile coach, or the person working on different levels of company management, to familiarize themselves with systems thinking and with its tools. Luckily, there are many sources where you can do this. One of the sources is with a very, like, let's say, low-level entry point is the less.works website, where they have some description about the systems thinking and modeling. Or, yeah, I don't know, if we ever have the workshop on systems thinking at Agile Swarming, you can attend it, like those people who were there last year. They look quite happy, so I hope 1 year later they still don't regret spending the 3 hours of their life in the same room with me. So yeah, I believe that the best way to introduce systems thinking to your workplace is to be a systems thinker yourself, and to provide the rest with some tools and techniques for applying systems thinking in practice. And I think I need to speed up. So the next one is minding the business. What do I mean by that? Very often, like, managers are hired and tasked to take care of some part of the business. Like, there are very few people in every company who are supposed to work on the whole company level, and typically they want to delegate it to someone. So they start breaking down the company structure into smaller parts and hiring some managers to take care of those parts. What I've seen many times again and again in the different companies is that these people, they often get a tunnel vision. When they arrive, they think only about their own part of the company, and they want to do everything to optimize this part of the company, but not the rest. And the last story that I described, talking about systems thinking, was a good example of that. So another person I really adore when it comes to leadership skills and also to some advices on leadership is Jocko Willink. This is a ex-Navy SEAL who turned into like a leadership consultant and who has several successful businesses himself. He has a book, by the way, with a very selling title for leaders called Leadership Strategy and Tactics. You might want to read it. I really like it. And one of the things he often tells about is the power of detachment. So he says that very often when you get pulled into the problem and you're like the problem is part of your life and you're focused on it, it's very difficult for you to take a step back, look around, and see what is the easiest way to solve it. For that, he suggests to practice the so-called power of detachment, which he talks more about in the book. And I can describe it with one situation. So 2 years ago, I was at a company offsite. The company was working remotely, but every half a year we were coming together with department leaders to do some kind of quarterly planning, retrospective, and also team building. And yeah, it was in Portugal. It was very nice weather. When I arrived there, I thought, and I'm coming here to work. I just want to lay on the beach. But I had to work. And so we spent 2 days working together. We started with doing some exercises for team building. Then we did the retrospective of the previous quarter. And when then day 3 of the offsite arrived, we started working on the OKRs for the upcoming quarter. And 4 hours into that session, I observed a very interesting behavior, which you might have seen very often as well. So people there who were the head of product, head of engineering, engineering managers and product managers, they suddenly understood that the work they have put on the roadmap is not enough to give to all teams. So what was their intention? They decided to what else can we give to these teams in order to utilize all the teams? What else we can come up with in order to give everyone enough work? And for me, this was initially the example of this tunnel vision, because the way the company was structured had a different purpose. We were intentionally building up cross-functional teams which had quite a similar skill set and expertise, so that we could easily take team from one department and put it to another department based on the priorities of the company. But the behavior the leaders were demonstrating was exactly the opposite. We have teams, we have 4 teams, and we have work for the next quarter only for 3 teams. We need to come up with some work to give to the 4th team. Luckily or unluckily, I was there, and I started questioning that. And I started asking them questions. So, okay, but is the thing you're coming up with now the most important thing from the business? What is the return on investment do you expect? How does it compare to the plans other departments have? And so on and so forth. And in the end, we agreed that probably we need, instead of trying to come up with some work for that 4th team, we just need to have a call with the top management and tell them that, okay, we had a planning, and based on what we see as important things of importance, we have 1 team which we can give to some different department if you say that their work is more important. For me, this was a very interesting moment, because I understood that this is something we very often have. Very often we have, for example, product owners or management who believe that the whole purpose of sprint planning is to plan 100% of capacity of each team member, make sure that everyone has enough work to do for 40 hours in the next 2 weeks, and 80 hours in the next 2 weeks, and no lagging time, no idle time. The same often happens on the higher company levels. And this is exactly what often leads to lack of focus, lack of clear commitment, and lack of ability to clearly identify whether sprint, quarter, or year was successful or not. So what I typically suggest Scrum Masters and Agile coaches to do is to actually challenge those beliefs, challenge the belief that we need to put, if we are given 10 developers, we need to come up with work for 10 developers. If we are given 5 teams, we need to come up with work for 5 teams. Challenge that and make people think more in terms of focus on the value, and whether actually there are some other places in the company where these people or these teams can bring more value. Not all companies are designed in a way where it's possible, so please keep it in mind, but I believe this is what the true agility is. It's only 2 left, please bear with me. The next one is participation, and I think this is what is often missing in the companies we work with. So, yeah, we probably know Taiichi Ohno, who is one of the founders of the Toyota production system, which gave birth to the whole lean production approach. And one of the things Taiichi Ohno was propagating throughout his career was the so-called practice of Gemba walk. He was saying that in order to identify inefficiencies in the processes, in the way the company works, managers need to sometimes go and actually stand next to workers on the factory line, see how it works, ask some questions, show real interest, and help those workers to address some impediments which they don't have the power to address. This is what this is the essence of management, in my opinion. Utilizing the power you are given by the company in order to simplify the work of employers and employees, and simplify the processes, not make them more complex. Luckily, Gemba Walk or Go-See practice, as it's called in LeSS framework, is something you can utilize not only in hardware, but also in software. And one of the examples I have for this is coming from a company where I worked about 4 years ago. We had a manager who was technical himself, he was a CTO, and he was a Java developer not just like 5 years ago, who was still doing some stuff in his spare time to maintain the skill. And at some point, I felt that we are working in circles, because every time we have some kind of discussions with him, we end up discussing the same things again and again. Oh, what's wrong with the infrastructure? Oh, what's wrong with the quality practices? Why does it take so long for a team to to deliver this feature, which he himself would do in 3 days? This was a very typical estimate coming for him. And the suggestion I came up with, look, if this is such a big problem and if you see it as a recurring pattern, why don't you just go and join the team for a few days, maybe even write some code, because I know you do this in the evenings. Why don't you just join the team and see how it actually works? And after he joined the team for a few days, and he even actually took one subtask and tried to put it into a code, got bashed during the code review because his code style was not perfect. But then the insight moment came when he tried to actually merge his PR into the staging. He immediately understood all the problems we had with infrastructure, all the problems we had with pipelines, all the problems we had with test automation. And these few hours he spent with teams gave him much more real food for thought and understanding of the situation than like hundreds of Excel reports, slides, and reports from his from his project managers, and so on and so forth. So I won't tell you into details about how to perform the Gemba walk. You can find a lot of information on it, and there is even this lots of articles which describe 7 steps of Gemba walk to apply. But what I usually encourage Scrum Masters and Agile coaches to do is to basically suggest Gemba walk or Go-See as an experiment. Suggests that your manager just spends a few days with the team, not as a manager who everyone is scared of, but as a, let's say, team member, and let him try everything from inside. Let him feel how it actually feels to be the member of this team. This can uncover very many problems that they are not aware of. And if you feel, by the way, that this is too expensive and this is not a smart way to use the time of a high-paid manager, then believe me, the potential losses you may get from decisions they will make just by looking at PowerPoint and Excel spreadsheet are much higher than the time he will spend with the team. The very obvious one, I call it walk the talk. Typically, people call it leading by example. So I don't have much time left because I want to leave some time for Q&A, but I will try to tell this story short. Besides Socrates, there were many other philosophical schools, especially later, and I am personally very fond of Stoic philosophy. Probably you have heard about Stoicism, Marcus Aurelius, and all these people. And there was one of the famous authors and teachers of the Stoic school we still know nowadays, called Epictetus. So Epictetus was born as a slave, which was quite normal back then. Thanks to his intellectual capabilities, thanks to continuously learning and becoming the follower of the Stoic school, he at some point became a free man. But before that, there was a period when he was a teacher to the future Emperor Nero, which was a very weird person, which burned half of Rome back then when he became an emperor, and who actually hated Epictetus because he was like challenging him all the time and pointing at his negative traits. So there are many important ideas which comprehend the body of knowledge of the Stoic philosophy, but one of the key ideas is that the only thing we actually possess is our way of thinking. So we can't affect the things which happen around us. We don't own the money we have. We don't own the real estate we have. We own only our thoughts and the way we think about everything that happens. So whenever, like, I don't know, our house gets burned, or we get robbed, or I don't know, we lose a limb or something else, which sounds horrible, we need to accept it, because like it was never ours. It was given to us and it was taken back, and that's all. And I really like to tell this because Epictetus, in my opinion, was the person who was actually living to this standard. So one time he was sitting in his building in Rome where he was living. He had like some slaves, he had some people serving him, and he got called to the Nero emperor. And because Nero has become an emperor, finally he could utilize the power. And he said that the Epictetus has no place in Rome anymore, and he should go into exile. And for Romans, exile was the most terrible thing, because you were taken, everything you have managed to collect, like all the money, the power, was taken away from you. And the respect Epictetus said was, well, okay, looks like we'll need to have breakfast in that place they're sending me to. So he demonstrated all the traits that Stoic philosophers were supposed to follow in the real life. And I really like this quote of him: "Don't explain your philosophy, embody it." So very often we have managers who talk a lot about the company values, what we respect, what we don't respect, and they want to really be good leaders. But the worst thing happens is when these leaders fail to actually live up to these standards themselves. And it happens quite often. So one of the top managers I've been working with, he was talking a lot about safe environment, about respect to each other, about treating people with respect. But he was originally from Turkey, and very often he would lose his temper and behave disrespectfully, we can say, call it this way, which was very contradicting to what he was propagating. Luckily, we had a good level of trust, and he was trusting me as a neutral person, as a third-party opinion. And we agreed that every time he behaves like that, I will give him some sign, which we agreed upon, to show that he is doing it again, that he should stop doing it. After we spent some time doing this exercise and him seeing how often does it happen, we also agreed that we need to work a bit in the format of coaching, that I will kind of try to help him to overcome this personal trait. And I'm not propagating that all of you need to go and learn professional coaching, because this is very expensive and takes a lot of time. But it's very good to at least master the fundamentals of coaching, like the art of active listening, art of presence, and also art of mirroring the behavior to people, so that they can see how their counterproductive behavior influences others around them. This way, you can, if you can do this, and if you get a consent from the leaders to help them, you may really help them overcome issues which have been bothering them, not only in their professional career, but also in their personal life, like it was with this person. Yeah, and just to wrap it up, about talking about leadership. So there are many models about leadership. There are like many things we can read about leadership, but I believe that deep inside ourselves, we all know what good leadership is and what good leadership is not. So I think that we, as Marcus Aurelius said, should waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be, but we should be ones ourselves and help others to become those. I hope the tools and the traits I shared with you can help you with that in your working life. Thank you.